Hi, Honest Discussioner here. This is a video response to Princess Anna Nikki on the Patriarchy. I would highly recommend you check out her channel. She's got the triple threat of brains, beauty, and British accent. At least I think it's British. I don't know. I had to use British for alliteration purposes, but maybe it's a different area of that. Anyway, check her out. Now in her video, Anna Nikki basically is discussing the formation of the patriarchy. And for those of you that don't know, it's the idea that basically this is a male-dominated society. I think she literally defines it as the idea that the male is the head of a household and that basically the family is descendant through the male line. Male's important, females not so much. Now, obviously this is more modern times, so it's not quite so literal anymore, but it's more so the idea that women are put down in the working environment. Men basically want them to stay in the kitchen, that the best jobs go to men, that women have to work twice as hard for just as much work. That apparently they get paid 25 cents less per hour. I think on average, I don't think she mentioned that in her video, but hopefully you get the gist. Now I'm going to agree with her mostly, but there's a couple of points that I want to possibly critique about at least, not necessarily her conception of the patriarchy, but the conception of patriarchy in total. Before I do that, she asked two questions, those being, is the patriarchy something that society has evolved? Is this an evolved state that we rely on men more than women? And if so, why? Why do I believe that? She gives some very good evidence, though, to the contrary of this, and I'd actually have to agree with her. I don't think that we have evolved in any way to necessarily prefer men. She shows a bunch of societies that are actually more female-dependent. I don't think we'd go as far as to call this matriarchy, the exact opposite of patriarchy, but at the very least it seems that this is a social dynamic, that this is caused by social factors. Human minds are very, very malleable, and we are able to fit. You take someone from today, a young newborn, put them back 10,000 years ago, they'll fit in just fine, most likely. At least they have just as much a chance of fitting in as any other child from that era. We're very socially adept, basically. What I do want to criticize, and this might not actually be something that Anna Nikki brought up in her video or even contends, but the idea of the patriarchy as more of an institution rather than a phenomenon. Basically, the question that I'd like to pose is there a group of men out there that are trying to institute patriarchy and make sure to keep women down, or is this an individualized response? I'd like to argue that it is in fact the latter. Whether Anna Nikki holds this or not, I'm not actually sure, but it is my main problem with discussions of patriarchy, because whenever you talk about an oppressed group, there's automatically in your mind you're thinking that there is therefore an oppressor, and that might not necessarily be the case. For example, the difference between what I'm talking about here would be the difference between a man who just happens to prefer men because of, not sexually of course, but happens to prefer hiring men because he sees himself as more one of them, that feels more comfortable around men, so therefore hires men and does not hire women, even if the women are actually better suited to the job. The other side of the coin is if it's more of an institutionalized patriarchy, the idea that a man is actually saying, I'm not going to hire a woman because she's a woman and she deserves to be in the kitchen, that's where she belongs. That's a very huge difference in my mind, and I think it's a very important distinction that we have to make when we discuss these issues. Again, I don't know where Anna Nikki stands on this, so I would like to pose the question to her on this point. Do you think the patriarchy is more institutionalized, or do you think it's just more of a phenomenon that occurs on an individual level? Obviously, you're going to be able to point to a couple people that are very sexist against women and are very blatant about it, but is this the exception rather than the rule? This is not to excuse the institution of patriarchy in any way. This is not to excuse the idea that women should be kept down because it's merely an individualized response and it's not on purpose. Women, I am a very huge supporter of meritocracy, where people are given jobs and given opportunities based on their merit, on their own self-worth, and gender just, I'm sorry, does not speak to that at all, and not at least in any sort of meaningful sense. So, should we be trying to stop discrimination against women on even if it's on just an individual level? Of course. Should we do it on a non-individual level? Of course. But I still would like to make this distinction because sometimes men are made out to be the bad guys, as though that there is some sort of, again, institutionalized organization that's trying to make sure that white men stay in power and everyone else doesn't. There certainly can be examples of this, but is that what's happening across the entire whole? I'd like to argue it isn't. Those are basically the thoughts that I have for this video. Hopefully, I look forward to your response, Anna Nikki. I really like your channel. Glad I found you. And have a nice day. Honest Discussioner, out.